How you doing? I'm Sean McVeigh with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and in this video I'm going to do a comprehensive review on the Diamond Edge SB-1 compound bow. So here it is right out of the box. I haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet. Now I was contacted by the people of huntingbow.com. They're the ones who asked me to do this review. They want to know if this bow does what the manufacturer says it does. They want an unbiased review on this bow. So that's what I'm going to do here today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the basics of the bow, talk about some of its features, and I'm also going to explain some of the difference. For example, this has a binary cam system. I'm going to explain what is the difference between a binary cam system and some of the others. For example, a hybrid cam system, which is what you have on these compound bows hanging back here. So I'll explain the difference, what that means to you, the consumer, and how that impacts the overall performance of a bow. I'm also going to set the bow at 70 pounds, 30-inch draw length, and shoot it through a chronograph to see how fast it is. I'm going to shoot it with an arrow that weighs 362 grains. I just measured it, or just weighed it. The reason for that is I wanted something right around 350 grains. Most manufacturers and also the IBO rating requires 5 grains, at least 5 grains per pound. So at 70 pounds, 5 grains, that equals 350 grain arrow that you need to shoot out of the bow in order to not damage the limbs. So the arrow is going to be 362 grains, which is right near there. We want to see what speed this bow provides. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the poundage down, and I'm going to start modifying the draw length and shoot it through the chronograph again to see what kind of speed it's going to produce for a youth-aged hunter or archer. So what I'm going to do is I'll start at 30-inch draw length, drop the bow down to about 50-pound draw weight, which is something that you might see a 15 or 16-year-old shooting. I'll leave it at the 30-inch draw to start, shoot it through the chronograph, and then I'll drop it down to a 27-inch draw and see what that does to the speed of the bow. So you have an idea when you look at these ratings, when a bow says the bow shoots 318 feet per second, what does that mean once we get down into your draw weight and draw length? So those are some of the things I'm going to do. I will talk a little bit about bow tuning. Right out of the box, I'm going to shoot an arrow through a paper tuner to see how well the bow is in tune right when you take it out of the box. Is there tuning you're going to need to do right away? I want to cover that. So let's go ahead and get started. The specs of the bow, and I'm just going to read it off of the brochure that comes with just so I don't make a mistake. It goes from 7 to 70 pound pull. This max speed, the IBO speed, is 318 feet per second. Axle to axle length, which is right here, the axle is the pin that goes through the limbs that holds the cam on. So from the center of this axle to the center of this axle is 31 inches long. The brace height, which is typically a measurement from the handle to the string, is 7 inches. The significance of that is the larger the brace height, typically the more forgiving a bow is, and a longer brace height bow will also be a little less likely to hit your string when the shot goes off. Doesn't mean you won't hit your arm, it just means that a longer brace height is going to make it a little easier for you to not do that. The draw length goes from 15 inches to 30 inches, and the weight of the overall bow is 3.6 pounds. First, I want to talk about what you get with this bow. Again, it's a binary cam system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It comes with a D-loop pre-installed for hooking a mechanical release onto. You have the style of rest. Now, whisker biscuit, if you're new to archery, you might not have heard that term before, but they came out with a rest years ago that had bristles 360 degrees around the arrow here that would hold it in place. The drawback to that rest, well, the advantage was it held your arrow in place and you didn't have to worry about it falling out of the rest. Even in a hunting situation, you could bang it around and it wasn't going anywhere. The drawback to that was that the fletchings on your arrows would get warped and impacted by that over time. Let me grab an arrow real quick. The advantage to this style rest is they removed all the unnecessary bristles. Now you're always going to want to knock your arrow with the odd color fletch facing straight up. This particular arrow has all white because I film my hunts and So I use all white fletchings. I make my own arrows in order to do that. But in a normal situation, pretend there's two white fletchings here and a black one, let's say, sticking straight up. You always want that odd color one sticking straight up as opposed to straight down. Because of the way this rest is designed, you need it that way for your arrow fletch clearance. So it's going to be in this position as opposed to this position. You see the fletch facing down? That is going to hit the bottom part of this rest, and that'll be no good. So always make sure you nock the arrow with the odd color fletch facing up. The bow also comes with an Apex 3-pin fiber optic sight right here, and it does have a level in it. That is very important to me. I always want a sight with a level in it so I can make sure my bow is plumb when I'm aiming, because this is important, especially if you're new. If you're holding the bow slightly on a cant and not realizing it, when you get back at farther distances, your pins will not be in vertical alignment. Even the slightest modification on a cant is going to throw your arrow off from right to left. So it's extremely important to hold the bow vertically, and having the level will help you make sure you're doing that. The bow also comes with a octane stabilizer as well as sling. I really like the fact that it comes with a sling. This helps you make sure you don't grab the bow too tight. You can just relax your hand, let the bow do whatever it wants, and it's not going to go anywhere because you have this sling around your wrist. The bow also comes with an octane quiver. I personally actually really like this octane quiver for a couple reasons. One, it's extremely light. It's one of the lightest quivers that I've come across. Another reason, it actually snaps in very solidly. Let me just click it on there. So the top goes in the top part, and then you twist it, and the bottom clicks in. It holds in very firmly, but this is what I like the most about it. It has 2 capture points. You'll see a lot of quivers out there that have 1 capture point. They don't have this piece here. And it's a lot easier for your arrows to get knocked out of the quiver if there's only 1 capture point. So having 2 capture points is really nice for a quiver. Another nice thing about the quiver is these, I can tell, are not totally tightened yet. You can adjust the height of the quiver and then tighten these little screws right here. And the longer your arrows, the higher up you're going to want to put this, because you don't want your arrows hanging too far down below the bottom of the bow. Now this is a solid limb bow. It's not a split limb bow. Let me grab one of these. So here's an old Hoyt I have. It has a split limb bow. The reason why you're going to see a solid limb bow on a bow with binary cam system is because the cables on a binary cam system go from one cam to the other cam. So the cams are slaved together. That helps them keep in synchronization. On a cam and a half system or a double cam system, you're going to have a yoke system right here which goes to the outside edges of at least one of the limbs. And what that does is it helps you control the limbs. You can have what's called cam lean, where the cam begins to lean. If the cam's leaning too far in one direction, you can add twist to one of the yokes and bring the cam back in alignment. With the binary cam system, because the cables go from one cam to the other cam, you're unable to adjust the limb in that way. And as a result, they go with the solid limb, so you don't have that torquing and cam lean as easily with the solid limb bow. But the advantage of a binary cam system, as I was saying, is because the cams are slaved together, they're supposedly supposed to stay in synchronization a little bit easier, which means less concern for tuning for you. A couple last things before we move to the next step is, I just want to mention there is a Peep sight that comes with the bow, and it's in a little baggie right down here on the bottom. So the Peep sight is not installed. Something that's very important is don't try to install a Peep sight unless you have a bow press. You can damage the strings if you try to push something in there to split the strings. As you can see, there's a yellow and a gray strand of string, so you want that evenly split, the gray on the one side, the yellow on the other. I'm speaking of one side of the Peep sight. Gray on one side, yellow on the other. The other thing I just want to point out is it does not come with a light on the sight. There's a place right here in the top where you can screw a light in. I would recommend getting a light in two scenarios. If you're just doing archery and not hunting, if you're ever in an indoor range, having a light is very helpful because indoors it can be difficult to see your pins at times. If you're new to hunting and you're planning to hunt, especially for youth-aged people or young people, very often they do hunting off the ground or in a ground blind. When you're in a ground blind, natural light does not reach the sight very well, and so it's extremely difficult to see your pins. So if you're somebody who's new to hunting and this is your first bow that you're planning to use for hunting, make sure you get a light that'll fit into here because that's going to help you in a ground blind situation. Now let's go ahead and put this on the draw board to see what draw length it's at and what poundage it's at. So fresh out of the box it was at 42.7 pounds and 26 and an 1/8 inch draw length. Let's see how accurately it shoots at what it comes out of the box at. Okay, since we're going to start off with the bow at 42 pounds, I'm going to use this youth arrow and we are going to weigh it with a 100 grain tip to see what the weight of this. These youth arrows are made by Victory Archery Gen X 600 spine. So the weight is 346 grains. The next thing I want to do before shooting this is just see where the knock point is in relation to the rest, if it's dead on. And as I can see here, the knock point right out of the box is a hair high. Typically with a binary cam system they say it should be dead on. But I personally, when I'm tuning a bow for my long draw length, usually put it a hair high. So I'm going to shoot it as it is and we're just going to see where that's at. Another thing Diamond will tell you to do if you want to set the height of the rest is look at the burger button hole right here. And when you're looking at it from the side, the arrow should be covering it up. If it looks like this, the arrow rest needs to be moved up. If it looks like this, where the burger button is below the arrow, you want to move it down. So this is an eyeball test. It'll get you close. I'll also double check to just see where the center shot is. One real rudimentary and easy way that I like to use to check center shot is I tape a string from the center of the limb bolt on the top and the bottom, and I have an old arrow that I cut off right here, and I'm going to move the camera so you can have a straight on view, and you can see that out of the box this arrow rest is way out of alignment. So right here I'm lining up the string with the string of the bow. See the string of the bow back there? Now I'm going to come into alignment with it and look at where my arrow is pointing. The dead center of the arrow should be right in the center of that string right there, and you can see it's way out. The reason I'm pointing this out is because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be buying this bow off of the internet, not through a pro shop, and they're going to take it out of the box, be all excited and want to run out and start shooting, but there is some tuning that you're going to want to do before you do that. If I was to start shooting this bow with the arrow rest that far out, I'm going to damage the rest with the way the arrow is going to go through it on an angle, and I'm also going to be damaging the fletchings on my arrow, and that's going to wear out my equipment way sooner than I want it, and I'm also going to be inaccurate with my shooting. To fix this is a simple enough adjustment. I take the appropriate size Allen wrench, not included with the bow, and I adjust this Allen wrench screw right on the top of the arrow rest piece here, and then I'm going to slide the arrow rest that way until it's in alignment with my string here. I also want to comment on that, the sliding of this piece through there when I loosened it up, it wasn't real smooth, so you might have to jiggle it a little bit. It's not a high quality rest, it's just an entry level rest, and so you're not going to have ease and adjustment that you would have maybe with a more expensive one. However, this is a good rest for a beginner. Okay, now showing you the difference. Look at the front string with the back string, and the arrow is now perfectly aligned with it. Again, for my little rig, I just put a piece of tape over a string, dead center of the top of the limb bolt, came right down the middle and taped it right there to the bottom limb bolt. Now I have an arrow knocked on the string. I'm looking at the center of the limb bolt here, lining it up with the center of the stabilizer, and I'm looking at the arrow. They're fairly in line. Everything looks pretty close. For the right to left, if you don't like the methods I use, you measure the distance from the riser of the bow to the arrow in the front here and in the back. And if that measurement is not the same, then you need to move the arrow rest left or right to make them the same. I kind of like my method a little better though. Either way, they will get you close. So having it close is going to enable me to start shooting. I do have a lot of bow tuning videos. I'm going to put links for those in the description section of this video, so make sure you check those out. Even if you're not going to do a whole lot of bow tuning yourself, it'll be good for you to have a basic understanding of how it all works so you can double check when a pro shop does it for you to make sure that they're doing it correctly. Before I do that, I want to adjust the sling here. It's a very simple adjustment. You just feed the strap through. I just need to make it a little longer because I'm a bigger person than it's set for. So you'll want that so that it's just limp around your wrist. You don't want it very tight, and that way when the bow goes off, even if you let go, it's not going anywhere. But you don't want it too tight to where it's inhibiting the bow in your grip. Now I'm going to shoot through paper just to get an idea of how this bow performs now that I've done that. I'll also say this arrow is a brand new arrow, and out of the box the odd color fletch faces to the side, which is what you would want to do traditionally with a recurve bow shooting off the shelf or off of a rest to the side. But this is an arrow rest designed for shooting with a release, and so that odd color fletch needs to face upward. Always make sure the odd color fletch is facing upward. Now let me just shoot this through the paper right here and see what it does. Right here in this example of a perfect paper tear from another bow that I shot, and now let me just show you. Here's the shot I just did. So the fletches are to the right of the point of the arrow, which means I would need to move the arrow rest even more toward the right. My point in showing you that is simply so you know there is a little bit of tuning involved even with a brand new bow out of the box. So if you're buying this off the internet, make sure you watch the tuning videos and go through the steps to tune it up. However, since that's a different topic, let's move on with the review. What I want to do now is shoot the bow through the chronograph. Right now it's at about 42 pounds at a 26-inch draw length, right around there. So I want to shoot it at 26-inch draw, and then I want to lengthen it out to 30-inch draw so you can see the difference that draw length has on the speed of the bow. It's going to increase the speed, but let's see how much. Alright, before I shoot through the chronograph, I just want to point out a couple things real quick. First of all, don't ever pull a bow back unless you have an arrow knocked on the string. The reason is, if you pull a bow back without an arrow and accidentally release the string, that's called dry firing the bow. That can damage or destroy the limbs and or the cams. Your strings can jump off of the cams, you can get injured. So a lot of bad can happen by dry firing a bow. So never draw a bow back unless there's an arrow knocked on the string and you're pointing it safely at a target. Another thing I want to point out is this particular bow has cable stops. So on the cam system here, this black piece is going to come around and hit the cable, and that's going to stop you from being able to draw it back any farther. However, since it's a cable stop as opposed to a limb stop, when you're at full draw, you can actually overdraw the bow, which is going to push it into the cables even farther, and that's going to impact your shot. It'll increase your draw length, It'll increase the speed of the arrow. It'll change where it hits vertically on the target. And so you need to be conscious of that. When you hit full draw, you don't want to overdraw the bow. Let me point this safely at the target here. I'm going to have my arrow to the side of the chronograph just so that's not in the way. But I'm going to hit full draw. Now watch this. Watch the cam. See how it rotated a little bit right there? See that rotation? I'm pulling it harder into the draw, and you look at my draw length, how it's increasing. All of those things are going to impact everything about your shot, where it hits, how much draw length, how much draw weight you're applying. And so my reason for pointing that out is when you hit full draw, you don't want to keep pulling too hard. You just want to keep a gentle back tension. You always want a slight back tension so your arm doesn't come forward, but you don't want to overdo it. So let me turn on the chronograph now. Let's take a couple shots. So that's 209 feet per second. Let's take a few more and get an average. On this shot, I'm going to pull a little intentionally harder into the draw stop, and let's see what it does to the speed. 213 feet per second. So as you can see, it added 4 feet per second by me just pulling a little harder into the draw stop. So you definitely need to be conscious of that when you're shooting. Let me take one more shot. .211 feet per second. So you can see there's a little variation depending on how hard you come into the draw stop, and that is going to have an impact on where your arrow hits, especially in your longer shots. Let me leave the weight of the bow right where it's at and change the draw length. Let's move it back to 30 and see what that does to the speed of this bow. Alright, I've just double checked the literature that comes with the bow, and they don't even give you instructions here on how to adjust the draw length. They do give you references to videos, but that means now you got to go to the internet to watch that, which is a little bit, inconvenient depending on where you're at. Okay, so I adjusted the draw length, and in doing so, there's a little marking right here on the cam, and the draw length that you want, you just line that up with it. So it's now at 30 inches draw. However, I will say this. If the limb is in the way of the middle screw here, you may have to adjust the draw weight in order to get access to that. I then checked the draw weight on my draw table, and it actually increased when I changed the draw length. And so I had to take a crank out of the limb bolts in order to get it back to around the same draw weight that we did the other test with. So now at 30-inch draw, with about a 42, 43 inch-pound pull, we're now at 236 feet per second, whereas before we were around 212. So you can see that a longer draw length is going to increase the speed of the bow, and the reason is because the string is exerting a force on the arrow for a longer period of time. I have the bow on the draw table. It's reading 29.5 inches when it's supposed to be 30, and peak weight is 70 pounds. The scale is reading 71.6, just a slight variation. However, the draw stops when the cables are dead on, which is nice. When you're adjusting the draw weight, there are markings on the limbs. There's a little knob on the riser right here, and then there's markings here. So try to line those up as much as possible, but what I also recommend is taking a tiller measurement, which is a measurement from a specific point on the riser. Just pick one. You could even make a mark with a pencil, and then measure over to, sometimes what I like to do is take a measurement from the axle pin down to the string and make a mark with like a silver marker, and just to make sure that I'm measuring to the same exact spot on both ends. So I'll measure to that point, and I'll check my tiller, make sure those measurements are the same. They should be. Because what can happen, especially if you're not at peak weight and you're making an adjustment to the draw weight, is you could have one a little bit turned more than the other, and that's going to throw off the timing of your cams. So you want to make sure those are equal. So now I have my heavier arrow. This is a 362 grain arrow. And I needed to switch arrows because that other one was only rated for a maximum of about 45 pounds. Now I'm at 71 point, whatever it was, 70, a little over 71 pounds. And this is a 29.5-inch draw as opposed to a 30. It's supposed to be 30, but you know, that can be affected by the cable length. You know, if one stretches more than another, that can impact your draw length. Taking twist out of the string can lengthen the draw length, but it's also going to increase the draw weight. So if you're somebody who has a longer draw length, like closer to 30 to begin with, you might want to look at a bow that is going to adjust beyond that and not so much this one. But if you're a young person, you know, with a short draw length and you've got a long way to grow, so far I really like this bow for somebody in that category. Let me turn this on. .305 feet per second. That's pretty good. So again, once you get your bow close in tuning and you want to refine it and really get it on, make sure you watch my bow tuning videos. And I'll probably do one specifically with this bow. Even though I cover all the bow tuning information in my other videos, I might do another one just so you can see it being done with this bow. And I'll do that when I have time. Make sure you check the description section of this video for links to all other applicable videos. And I'll also say this, Diamond does have a list of videos for tuning the bow and shooting the bow, and I did watch a few of them, and I will say I disagree, especially with one of them, and it has to do with stance when shooting. There's what's called an open stance, where your front foot, like if I'm facing you right now, my front feet, both my feet are parallel. Now if I open the front foot so it's over here, that's called an open stance. And then a closed stance would be if I exaggerate and put my front foot over here. Their recommendations are that if you draw back the bow and you find that the bow's over here, do a closed stance so that the bow is now pointed at the target, and because you want to be able to duplicate and repeat the same thing every time. However, I think that is really bad advice for a beginner. And I talk about this in my archery book, Sin and the Spirituality of Archery. I go through a lot of technical aspects of form. I recommend for someone new to archery to shoot with an open stance. So my front foot, like if you're the target, I'm going to bring my front foot over here. Let me show you what that does. So if I'm holding the bow here and I have a closed stance like they're saying, when I come back like this, there's a much higher likelihood the string is going to hit this arm. And for somebody who's new, it's very easy for you to hit the arm with the string, and it hurts very badly. You should definitely wear an arm guard for that reason. Now, if I'm straight on, again, my arm's still fairly close to the string. However, if I open my stance, it brings this shoulder over and moves my arm away from the string. Watch where my arm is in relation to the bowstring. When I open the stance up, it's bringing my arm out of the way. So for someone new to archery, a slightly open stance is going to help you avoid hitting your arm with the bow. And if you watch a lot of Olympic archers, virtually all of them have a very open stance for that reason. Now their point in telling people to do a closed stance or a different thing was so that when you drew back, your bow was pointed directly at the target every time. However, no matter what you do, you're going to have to move the bow to get it in line with the target. And so again, the idea is a good one, that you want to do everything the same every time and be repeatable. But the one on stance, I really disagree with them, and so that's for you to make a decision on. And you can, based on the information I gave you, I think they're not giving the best advice, and maybe they'll change that video if they find out that I just said that. So my conclusion on the bow is I actually really like the bow. I like the fact that it can go from a 15-inch draw length to 30 or almost 30. I like the fact that it goes from 7 pounds to 70 pounds. I mean, this is the ideal bow for a young person or somebody brand new to archery. And if you don't have a draw length close to 30 inches, you're in good shape. The way you determine your draw length is to stretch your arms out and get a measurement from fingertip to fingertip. and divided that by 2.5. And so if you do that and your draw length comes out to 30 inches or more, I would say look at a bow with a longer draw length, because as you saw, I have this maxed out at 30-inch draw length and it only measures 29.5. See that little 30 right there and the tabs line up? That indicates that it's at 30-inch draw length. And both of them do that. So it says 30, but it measures 29.5. If you're 30-inch draw and you buy this bow, you might be a little uncomfortable because it might not be long enough for you. So as long as you're somebody who has a draw length shorter than that, this would be a good fit for you, I think, and it's something you could grow into. Get it for a young person, and in fact, I'm going to get my kids shooting this when it's time for them to start shooting compound. My oldest child is 4 years old right now, but as they get older, this is the bow I'm going to be teaching them on. And I definitely would recommend it to somebody who's starting out in archery. It's a great price point, and it has a tremendous adjustability. As I bring this video to a close, I just want to say be sure to check the description section of this video, because I'm going to have links to other important videos, archery tip videos. Also, I have a book called Sin and the Spirituality of Archery. It goes through my early years of archery, how I learned, and there's a chapter that's real technical on form, which as you get better and want to get better, that could really help you. And in the last chapter is just a spin-off. It has a little spiritual idea. I like to add God and a little bit of spirituality into my channel. If you're not interested in that, you don't have to read that. Those first 2 chapters can help you tremendously just in archery. But if you're interested in something related, and by the way, the word sin means the distance you missed the bullseye. And so that's where the play on words comes in. Sometimes in life, we might be trying to do our best and not quite hit the mark. And so it's an interesting twist. So you may like the chapter. If you're not into that, like I said, don't read it. But it can be a great resource for those of you who are getting started in archery or know somebody who is. And again, other related information is going to be communicated to you through the description section of this video. So make sure you go there and check that out. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this review has helped you and given you some things to think about. And I definitely do give it a thumbs up. Until next time, take care and God bless.